I don't think I'm turning P. Diddy off when Mo Money, Mo Problems comes on. That's a jam, even though he's a bit of a scum, right? Is it okay to say two different things? I don't know. I think that's the cognitive dissonance kind of kicks in, right? Frank still watches The Cosby Show. He freaking loves it. He tells me about it all the time. It's his favorite. That doesn't make him weird.
You're listening to Let Me Speak to a Manager with Frank Cava and Ian Matthews.
What a crock of shit.
Yeah, that was hot mic, Sam.
It's 30 minutes away. I'll be there in 10.
Do it live! I'll write it and we'll do it live!
Frankie!
Ian, you handsome glasses-wearing son of a bitch.
Frankie, this may be our last episode that we ever record. Chances of us getting canceled after doing an episode like this are very high. The FCC may come after us.
They may. But, Ian, I just want you to know that I'm not intimidated by the FCC. I think the FCC is fine. They're good humans. And I don't know about you, if you've noticed, but I think President Trump looks skinnier, younger. His skin is more resilient. It looks like he's doing some kind of a beauty program. I think
more
he's
handsome every day.
Job. He looks more handsome every day.
Elizabeth Warren, you're looking good. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's your exercise or not, but you're looking good also. Everyone's looking good up there in the government. The good news is, Frankie, no one listens to our show, so I don't think it'll get to the FCC. It's kind of just you and I yelling at each other in the echo chamber here with our dozens and dozens of loyal followers.
Yes, we're basically like your favorite dark channel of the internet. Just go here and hear exactly what you want to hear.
The deep dark web. Exactly. I don't know that we're that polarizing yet. We need to probably get more people listening to this before we can be that polarizing. But we're recording this 2 weeks after the assassination of Charlie Kirk. So that was on September 10th. We're recording this on the 24th. So I think we've had enough time to kind of mull on this and chew. And I think our take on this is going to be a little bit different than some podcasts, because I think it's symbolic of a few different things that are annoying Frank and I right now. The current state of the world, but also in businesses as well. So just kind of a quick summary. If you don't know who Charlie Kirk is, you've been sleeping for the last 2 weeks, but he was the co-founder of Turning Point USA, which was kind of a conservative think tank political organization that focused primarily on the youth of the world and trying to drive the conservative movement. So Charlie spent a lot of time debating. He had a very large social media presence, and a lot of people think that he largely was the kind of fringe reason that got Trump into office, because especially the young male college-educated cohort swung quite a bit towards conservative over the last 5-6 years, and Charlie was kind of at the head of that movement. So he was on a college campus and was doing what he always did, which was debating with a group of students. He typically would debate with liberal-minded students and was shot and killed. So without getting into all of Charlie's views, I think what has been interesting, not surprising to both Frank and I, is America's divided on it. So if you're a liberal, he was a villain. If you're a liberal, he is a cautionary tale and he's reaping what he sowed. If you're a conservative, he's a saint, he's a martyr. He died doing what he believed in, and his voice will be magnified now forever as the conservative voice. And I'm being a little obnoxious here. If you're a liberal and you listen to this, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but in general, it feels very much like there are two sides of this, and you're not allowed to be in the middle. There's no nuance. And I think that this episode, what Frank and I really want to talk about is, where has nuance gone? Where is the middle? Why is critical thinking gone? Why is the country so polarized? Why is everything 0 or 1? Why is everything binary? I think that's largely what we want to dive into, which is a parallel topic to Charlie's assassination. How'd I do warming that up, Frankie? Is that what we want to talk about today?
So the things that I don't want to talk about is the difference between liberals and conservatives and what you think about this guy. I don't really even want to talk about Charlie Kirk. People have asked me, like, what do I think of it? The only people who've asked me that is people who are conservative. Liberals, this is basically a non-topic. I feel like I am grossly underprepared and woefully out of my lane if I start getting into a lot of this stuff about him. The things that I will talk about that I feel very comfortable with, and how this kind of delves into an episode around business, which is mostly what we talk about, is I do think there are some things here that matter. And I think the whole thing matters. I think in the broader context, you've got a guy who was speaking his mind, which is allowed by our First Amendment, who was shot in the face, protected by the Fifth Amendment, which we may get into. And to me, I think there's a lot of things that have happened that are very, very wrong. Like when we started doing research for this episode, I started looking at what are the most polarizing assassinations in the history of America. And there's two common themes: disgruntled and mental illness. Those are the two big things that come up over and over again. But again, I don't know that I am the one that you want to listen to talk about that. So I'll talk about the personal side of this that I really worry about. And it's men. Men are the ones who are almost always these shooters. And what's causing it? So that's the thing that I'm really curious about as someone who's raising two young boys. I'm worried about them having successful lives. I'm worried about their safety. And I'm really worried about what is going on right now in society that's causing all these disgruntled kids to get a gun and think that's the best way to solve the problem. And I don't know how much deeper on that I can go. There's a book called The Boy Crisis that I'm in the process of reading that talks about this. There's the echo chamber of the internet. There's the glorification of killings in video games. There's all these other things. So what I think we can get to and we can talk about that is going to be undisputably inside of our lane is the critical thinking piece, what this means for society, what it means as managers, people that are participating in the human experiment, and that side of it, I think we can get really, really granular in. But the stuff that outside of that, I know I'm not the expert.
Yeah. So I am not interested. I'm not interested in talking about any of Charlie's views. I probably know more about Charlie than you do.
You know a lot more, yeah.
I'm not really interested in getting into his viewpoints and trying to debate some of them. What I will say is he died debating, and I feel like it's a lost art that people don't. Our politics have really led that way, Frank. That a debate used to be civil. It used to be one person talked, the other listened, took notes, then would state their case. They would use facts. They would use colorful stories. They would use context. That's debate. Debate is having an open mind and stating your stance, but listening to the other side, right? That's what a good debate does. And I think even today, some of the things that you just said, Frank, will create an uproar on social media, right? Saying that, well, it's all men. Well, no, it's not. There's this example of this, or saying, well, why men are there's psychosis out there, and men are unhappy, and you'll get people that argue on that side, and that's not the reason this happened. It's this. No one has an ability to say maybe it's a confluence of 20 different things that are all happening, and it's complicated, and it's difficult to figure out. Everyone has just a very one-sided approach. It's an incredibly polarized scenario, and it's, for me, I get very frustrated by this because I'll meet someone in, like, let's say I'll meet someone in my town and our kids play sports together. And I'll meet the dad sitting around, tired dad watching a soccer game on a Saturday. And I'm like, "Oh, I kind of like this guy. You're talking about sports, right? You're talking about, uh, where they grew up, what they do, what do you do for work? You get into all these things. You don't ever get into anyone's politics. And you see them every Saturday for a whole fall. And then you see them in a different context and you're like, oh, they're pretty cool. And you go along this route where you really like the person until like a year
And then
later
you see
when
their
you
social media profile.
then you kind of find out, oh, they voted different than me. And it sort of shakes you a little where you're like, wait, what? You voted that way? And I I whenever that happens, I always find it interesting because it's a little shocking at first because they're like, man, I had so much in common with them. But then you just stop and think about it. The only reason you think you don't have stuff in common with people when you find out how they vote early is you think of the things that you disagree with. But I always find that regardless of how anyone votes, I have more in common with them than I have not in common. All the little basic bullshit I just sent you, that's like my life 99% of the time. It's not gun rights or my views on abortion or my immigration thoughts or what we should do in Ukraine. Most of the time, I don't give a shit about any of that. It doesn't impact my life. I care about my kids, my family, my local community, how I spend my time. I think about those kind of things. And so when I run into people, politics doesn't even get brought up because it's not that important to either of us unless we started to get into an argument on something.
Yeah. So you're looking at politics, and what I'll get into from there, because I'm not going to go with politics, is do you know what Warren Buffett refers to as the eighth wonder of the world?
Compounding interest.
Right. So compounding is the eighth wonder of the world, right? And then if you look at, there's also a quote attributed to Einstein. It says, "Compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. He who understands it earns it. He who doesn't pays it." So, do you know when the Scantron test began, Ian?
70s, late 70s.
1972. Do you know when the first multiple choice test was put out in the world?
I'm gonna guess same time frame ish because they were certainly around in the 80s.
So 1914. So what I want to
Oh,
talk about, lack of critical thinking and how it started, right? So the US education system, because we're mostly talking about US here, it started off in the 1800s for the elites. And the first tests weren't written tests. They were oral tests, but it's really hard to orally test a group of people, so they started going to a written test. And they wanted to get to different type of testing, and around Civil War time frame, it was mandated that it stayed written. But after the Civil War, so like 1860s, 1870s, all the way through the First World War, like I'm going to use 1915, it was really just about written tests, but it's hard to use written tests at scale. So around 1915, and we're just about the time of the World War I, we started going to standardized tests, and the people who used standardized tests the most was the U.S. military because they needed to test aptitude for soldiers. So between 1915 and about 1950, it was mostly used for major standardization going to college with the SATs and the ACTs, and then it was for militaries, and then it moved its way into the broader context of schooling. When you were in school and you had a multiple choice test, what was your favorite answer? There was two answers that I always loved. It was, do you remember your favorite answer on like a Scantron test?
well, all of the above or B.
It was either D,
E,
all of the
e or
above, or
B.
E. D was like A and C, right? So like there was like it was fun because it was like, okay, it's not just one thing is right here. It felt like an anomaly. Like, and if you had a 30-question test, it was always one or two of those was always all of the above, right? But what I look at is if you go back to compounding interest and you go back to 100 years ago, we've gotten away from the ability to think because we are told that there's one answer, with the rare exception that it's either two of the above or all three of the above. But almost always it's one. So to me, the Scantron test is what fucked with the American mind and got to a point that there's only one viewpoint. And what started to happen with statues coming down and all these different things that are happening in the last 10 or 15 years is you look at these incredible leaders like Thomas Jefferson. We don't have a country without Thomas Jefferson. He believed that the port in Louisiana was an incredibly important thing in the 1800s, and he got that from a struggling French empire because they were at war, and he bought it for peanuts because he knew that without that port we couldn't be a major country. We couldn't thrive. Whoever controlled that port was going to thrive. Why? He also was a slave owner. So he did a lot of bad things, right? So like if you look at it from this perspective, no one is one of 5 choices. If you've actually led a good life, you're a combination of multiple things. And I think that's what you were saying a second ago about talking to people. There's people who you think you can get along with great, and they have completely different politics because it doesn't come in. So why can't you still continue to get along? So what I think is that we are in a 100-year cycle of making ourselves think or training ourselves to only have one right answer. And that is doing an incredible disservice. And it's gotten us into this place where it's only one voice.
It's really interesting you say that. If there's any engineers who listen to our show, an engineering exam, Frankie, is very different than what you just described. So an engineering exam might have 2 questions for like a midterm. 2 questions, that's it.
Right.
And you'd get like 2 sheets of paper, and it would talk about, we've got a bridge with some truss and the wind is blowing, and it would give you a bunch of different variables to think through, and you'd have to calculate a load or you'd do something else. But you had to show your work. You had to show your thinking. Here's what I'm thinking. You had to tell the teacher, here's the assumptions I'm making, right? So that they could see, okay, he's assuming A, B, and C. His B is wrong on the assumption, but when he goes and works through it, that's why he got the wrong answer. So you'd have to go through and show it. So you could conceivably, there were tests that I took, in some of my more challenging classes where I got the answer wrong and I got a B or I got an A because they liked my thinking. They liked the way I was going at the problem, and maybe I got the number wrong at the end, but it wasn't like this binary F. No, bullshit. That would be kind of bullshit. Like if I like fat fingered a calculator, which is what happens in multiple choice. But if I showed 2 pages of well thought out engineered logic on how I would solve the problem, but I got the wrong answer. Let's say I got the wrong ultimate load wrong on the bridge, but I could demonstrate to the teacher, I know how to make assumptions. I know how to put these equations to work. I understand the concepts. I could still score very high, and the teacher would. Most engineering professors I had were more focused on my process of thinking, my critical thinking, the way I would go about it, than they were the actual answer. That's not to say that the answer didn't matter at all. You still wanted to get the right answer, but you could do really well in an engineering class if you could prove to them that you had the ability to reason, to use critical thinking. And I think I love that you're using the multiple choice, because even in companies and organizations, there's 100 ways to skin a cat. I get asked this a lot because I coach managers, and it's like, what would you do? What would you say? And I'm always like, don't say what I would say. You're not me. But there's a lot of different things you could say that could get you a really good answer here. Why don't you tell me how you're thinking about it? Tell me your assumptions, just like engineering. Tell me your assumptions. Tell me the ramifications of doing it one way versus another way. Tell me the risk you've thought through. And okay, you got to make a choice now. But there might be 10 different ways you do this where you get a great outcome. That there's not one answer. It's not multiple choice. Nothing works that way.
38% of Americans graduate. 38% of Americans graduate with a 4-year college degree. So if you just use that example, 62% don't. The educational system that you're talking about is from Purdue University, where the average SAT score for admission is 1,300. The average US SAT score is under 9. So if you look at all these statistics, the masses aren't being educated this way. It's the sophisticated or the people who've made it to this next level. I think the better the university you go to, the smaller the classrooms and the more individualized learning there is. My wife, do you know the average size of my wife's class at her university?
I don't. I have no idea. 30?
6 to 12 kids. I'm like, they're not going to cut your department? She goes, no, most of my friends have, between 6 and 15. 15's a lot. Like, that's what it comes down to. Like, you can literally, I have kids that are in daycare. Daycare, it's literally one adult for 4 kids, because it's really, you're basically keeping those kids alive. It doesn't scale, like, unless you go to a Scantron test. So the best education you're going to get is going to be nuanced. Nuance education
It
gives you
doesn't scale
multiple.
unless you are highly subsidized by the state, right? Like, that's
Exactly.
how you can have 6 to 12 in a class. That loses money. You have to be subsidized. That's not real world.
Well, University of Richmond's private, so they're not subsidized. What they are is they're really high. They charge a fucking metric ton. It's $50,000 a year to go to a shit school in Richmond, Virginia, and because they're
Yeah.
private, but they work really, really specifically, right? Like 33% of
Yeah.
their students are on 100% full rides, or everybody else pays. But my point is this: the masses do not have access to critical thinking. And what you do is you get into this cult of personality type of belief because you hear something and you regurgitate it. So we just went on our annual hiking trip, and I'm going to leave all the names out of this, and I'm going to leave all the political stuff out of this. But I have a friend, and if I said his name, you probably know who it is without me saying the name. But he was dating this woman, and she's big on the right, like flies a banner. And he's talking to her, and she's pretty hot, so he was pretty interested in her. But like, even him, he started looking at it, he goes, she's just regurgitating things she hears on Fox News. Like, she has no idea any of the stuff that she's saying. And I think for 62% of the population, they've never gotten through a 4-year degree. They don't have the critical thinking. They don't work on that skill set all the time. And the way the internet is kind of this echo chamber of stupidity. It just feeds the things that you want and kind of silos your brain, because the less you think about, the easier are to target as a mark for advertising. So like, these are the way that these things work in the system. And I think it's why it kind of sets things up to be lined up the way that they are.
So in psychology, the term cognitive dissonance, it's a term that it defines when we feel discomfort, when our viewpoint, our worldview is challenged with new information. We don't like it. It makes us feel uncomfortable, right? When we feel a certain way and we're introduced to new information that might mean that we've been wrong all along, we flee. It doesn't feel good. And so that leads to confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is when we seek out evidence that proves that our worldview was correct. So the reason why that hot young lady is watching Fox News all the time and nothing else is confirmation bias, because it would be uncomfortable to learn new information that might make you uncomfortable, that all along I've not been right on that topic. And I think the concept of right or wrong can get you in trouble in business also, because again, there's usually not just one answer. It's Frank and I were joking about this. You can have multiple views on one thing. I can believe Pete Rose was an awesome baseball player and someone to look up to because he was Charlie Hustle and the way he approached the plate and the way he approached the game. And I can also think he's a bit of a dirtbag for betting on baseball. That's okay to have two views. I don't have to be polarized on Pete Rose. I can say I admire the hell out of him as a competitor, not so much his views. I can say that I like Michael Jackson's music. I can say I love the hell out of Billie Jean and Beat It, and also say dude was pretty much a creep in his regular life, right? That he did a lot of bad things. Does that mean I have to turn Billie Jean off every time it comes on the radio? It's got a good beat. It brings me back to a good time in my life. I don't think I'm turning P. Diddy off when Mo Money, Mo Problems comes on. That's a jam, even though he's a bit of a scum, right? Is it okay to say two different things? I don't know. I think that's the cognitive dissonance kind of kicks in, right? Frank still watches the Cosby Show. He freaking loves it. He tells me about it all the time. It's his favorite. That doesn't make him weird.
That last part was a joke. I don't like it. I love it. I absolutely love it.
Especially that Claire Huxtable. Really, really into that.
Nothing I like to do. Look at Claire Huxtable and listen to some Michael Jackson music from the 80s. So what?
It always rattles Frank when I drop a good Cosby joke in here.
This
This is a business podcast. What are you doing?
I have given up. It's where we go from here. The way that I think about it is this: like, it's okay to be nuanced. It's okay to have a multitude of thoughts. It's okay to listen to country music and also rap. It's okay to have multiple inputs. I think that makes things better, not worse. And what I think tends to happen is, so I started to think about this, right? If you have the ability to have nuanced thought in today's environment, right? I'll give you a couple of people. Like, I do not think Trump has got nuanced thought. I think mostly he's a buffoon. But if you look at Trump versus somebody else like a asleep at the switch Joe Biden, does he become a better choice, right? So you look at it from this perspective. But if you look at like cults of personality that rise up, you start to say, okay, how do you defeat a guy like Trump? He's hard to beat. So do you know who now is like in the running, or like in like the psychological zeitgeist of like, these are real candidates? People talk about literally no shit. The Rock, Bill Maher, Stephen A. Smith. Like, these are political candidates. And the reason that they're political candidates is because people listen to them and nod their head vigorously. And the reason that people listen to them and nod their head vigorously is because they can produce something that elicits emotion. Now, Stephen A. Smith to me seems like he has one pitch. It's fastball all the time. It's loud. It's one opinion. Maher is not. Maher's a comedian, does a lot of drugs, talks about it openly, but at the same time is open-minded. So now people are listening to him from the perspective of, whoa, he's become enlightened in his old age because he's able to articulate a thought. So what we've done is we have, as a society, because we're one-track thinkers, I think the bar has been lowered. Who we will accept to be leaders of us is lower because now the threshold has gotten to a point of who can actually say something that either many people will follow or can actually lead some thoughts that give me an ability to think. And there's so few people on either side that can do either of those two things.
And when that happens, you end up with groupthink. And,
yes,
you know, in business, groupthink happens for different reasons. It's not amplified by social media often. Usually groupthink is a survival mechanism in companies. Especially if you have a leader of an organization with particularly dug in beliefs, you start to hear everyone sounds like a mouthpiece of that person. And for years, you hear everyone just espousing the gospel of the CEO. And then the CEO is replaced and there's a new one. And you quickly hear everyone start saying, yeah, I thought that was stupid the way the old CEO did it. No, I never really liked it. But for years, they just went along with it because I'm trying to survive and I'm not going to rock the boat. And so you end up with this whole gaggle of people that no one ever speaks out. There's never any real discourse. There's no real critical thought. It's just follow and get on board and follow the leader until a new leader comes in and starts asking questions. And they're like, yeah, I never liked the way the other guy did it. I see that all the time, Frank. This group thinking, and it holds companies back. It holds companies back because you need dissenting opinions. You need opinions of people that say, I'm not sure I buy in on what we're doing. That doesn't make them bad people. It shows that they're capable of second guessing or seeking out new information that might lead them to a better truth. I think you need people like that. And I think as a leader, you need to surround yourself. My challenge to every manager is, do you have people that tell you the truth? Do you have people that tell you when you're effing up? Do you have people that are not afraid to say that's going to fail and here's why? Because if you don't have that as a leader, it's a race to the bottom. You're in trouble because as a leader, you're not close enough to the front line to know the unintended circumstances of every decision you make. You need the people on the front line to say, this isn't working and here's why, instead of just nodding their head and saying, sounds like a great idea, boss, while you lose money. You need that. And right now, we're being groomed as a country, Frank, to not second guess, to not question, to just get in with the biggest group we can find and get into the polarized group and agree with everyone and agree with every point. If I voted one way, I have to agree with every single point they did because now my ego is tied to it. That carries into a company. That carries into a company, that kind of subservient groupthink nonsense. And then you just get on board with whoever the leader is and no one questions anything until, you're blindly riding along in the car and it goes off the cliff.
So instead of me digging into groupthink, move on to our free speech conversation because I have something really good there.
Well, why don't you do that then?
All right.
What do you have that's really
talk
good? We'd all like to hear. Everyone's very interested in how good this is. It better be good now that you have led us in to believe that you have something really good on this.
It's nuanced. I might think it's good and it's probably shit. However,
nuanced. Look at Frank. Look at Frank modeling what we are talking about here. I like it.
So we talked a little bit about free speech and kind of what's going on with it, and we talked a lot about like what's happening in the news right now is Jimmy Kimmel, right? Jimmy Kimmel was canceled, and then Jimmy Kimmel was uncanceled inside of a few days. And I think I actually want to say something about this. So I think Jimmy Kimmel made a bad joke. I think Jimmy Kimmel's job is to make jokes, and I think Jimmy Kimmel tried to pick a side without being incredibly educated, and he said something that was really dumb. I listened to it. I don't think it was educated. I don't think it was nuanced. I don't think it was researched. I think it was emotional, and I think it was in poor taste. However, we have a First Amendment in this country, and the First Amendment is pretty significant, and it says that you have the ability to have free speech. And what free speech means is that you can get up on whatever you want, stand on a mountaintop and scream at the top of your lungs anything that it is that you think is relevant or that you believe. Charlie Kirk did this. He did it on college campuses, usually under a tent on a folding chair, and he would argue with people back and forth. And if you look at the arguments that he had, he was really effective. And I think what ultimately happened is he was shot because he scared people. He was convincing people of other ways of thinking. And
he was almost too effective.
He was. And if you look, and I mentioned this a minute ago, if you look at the most polarizing assassinations in history, Lincoln is up there, or in U.S. history, Lincoln is up there. He was assassinated because of someone who had firm beliefs in what the South represented. If you look at Malcolm X or MLK, both of them were very effective at talking about things that scared the shit out of white people from the South. Like you look at these things, this is
and they were changing minds. Both of them were changing minds. They were effective.
They were both really effective, and because they were effective, it scared people. I don't think Jimmy Kimmel is terribly effective. But what I do think, and I think this is real, and this is something that I believe in, I don't think Jimmy Kimmel was canceled because of free speech. I think Jimmy Kimmel was canceled because of money. I think Jimmy Kimmel's ratings suck, and he was pulled off the air. And then what happened is the backlash, they had to put him back. What they wanted to do, the networks, in my opinion, is take away his voice and get him out of his contract for a much smaller number than it would normally cost. Because we're talking tens of millions of dollars to get his ass off the air. And I think it's a broken business model. But there's something here in the business.
None of those shows are making money. None of them are making money.
No. But what I think has happened is I think the American people have been pimped out by corporate profits for almost as long as we've been taking the Scantron test, a very long time. And because of that, what we start to get into is these things where we will tolerate or we will put up with. And I think if there's going to be pushback, it's going to be against the small guy, the middle class, against these corporations that control us or fleece us of money. And so I think there's a combination of things happening here. I don't think it's 100% free speech. I think it has a lot more to do with corporate profit and greed. But my point in all of that is where we are at the free speech moment, there are people who are now rising up around free speech. So that was my kickoff to it. So go from there.
So one of the things that Charlie Kirk usually made an argument was around the topic of free speech, let capitalism decide. So if Jimmy Kimmel was that offensive, then people would stop listening. And if they stopped watching and listening, there would be less revenue. If there's less revenue, there's no profit. There's no longer a show, which I think you and I I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think that's kind of the way we see the world, right?
Yep.
If you offend that many people, you're going to end up losing. And I think the part that was a little bit unsavory to me is it felt very much like the government got involved and said cancel him and take him off the air. And I don't love that. I don't love someone losing a platform because it doesn't reconcile with the current administration, right? Because listen, I vote one way, but the way I vote isn't always going to be in office. And I don't want either side to be able to take some. So what's next? So then the Democrats get in and they say, take Rogan off the air, right? YouTube, you better not let his show work anymore because he has views that we consider dangerous. You need dissenting ideas. I'm not a Jimmy Kimmel fan. I don't really align with much of what he does. Part of the reason I don't like him is he's not balanced at all. He's all one side. You and I both like Bill Maher. Bill Maher is also a Democrat, but he is nuanced. He is a critical thinker. He's in the middle. He can say the things he doesn't like on the party that he votes for. And I don't think there's enough people like that can come out and say, I voted this way, but 30% of the stuff they stand for, I think is sort of batshit crazy. Because I think in most people's heart of hearts, that's really how they feel. And same in a company. I like this leader. I like this company. I think 30% of the shit we're doing is stupid. And I think we could make more money if we did things differently. I think that's how most people in their gut feel, but they don't say it that way. They get real defensive of every little thing because that's our guy and that to me is where we've lost a lot of our ability to reason.
So I'm going to go back to the soapbox on the critical thing or on the free speech, and I'm going to use two incredibly well thought of thinkers. The first is Voltaire. I disapprove of what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it. I think that is an incredibly well written statement from almost 400 years ago from someone who is looked at as a dynamic and critical thinker from, centuries gone by. Pivoting to another incredible thinker, J.K. Rowling's of Harry Potter fame. Her saying is the following: if you believe free speech is for you, but not your political opponents, you're a liberal. If no contrary evidence could change your beliefs, you're a fundamentalist. If you believe the state should punish those with contrary views, you're a totalitarian. And if you believe political opponents should be punished with violence or death, you're a terrorist. I love that because that is, to me, like, you should have the ability to think. And if you can't think, you're a liberal. Like these are the things that kind of work out. Like that's a multiple choice test that I can believe in because it's not telling you what to do. It's giving gradients to what people do. And that is, I think, how things need to be sorted and filtered. And you can look at it from those perspectives.
What about Ice-T's lyrics from the famous Freedom of Speech song from the same album? Freedom of speech. That's some motherfucking bullshit. You say the wrong thing, they'll lock your ass up quick. The FCC says profanity, no airplay. They can suck my beep while I take a shit all day. Now that, my friend, trumps Voltaire all day. That's some good stuff right there. That's powerful stuff. Ice-T speaking his mind powerfully with the freedom of speech.
Do you know what Ice-T's wife's name is?
No, should I? Am I on the outside looking in on this? Does everyone else know what Ice-T's wife name is?
So do you know what trumps Ice-T and Voltaire? Ice-T's wife, Coco Austin's moose knuckle. I was on a flight from LA to Puerto Rico with them 10 years ago, and that thing was incredible.
Did you snap a picture?
Every time she stood up, everybody would look like crane their neck around like you were like rubbernecking on the most incredible wreck you've ever seen, just to see what it looked like.
Oh my God. So I think without spending an hour on social media, I think that's a pretty obvious reason why we're getting so hardened to, because social media, the algorithms are all built that once they start to get the cut of your jib, that's all they show you. They don't show you the other point of view. And so if you have a worldview on one topic, it will just send you hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of examples that prove your point. And so I think people get so dug in because they're overconfident, because what they're looking at on their phone only shows them one side. They don't get two sides. Whereas I think people used to say, I don't know enough about that. So one of our favorite things about going to the Berkshire Hathaway meeting was when Charlie Munger would be asked, what do you think? So Warren Buffett has a thought on everything. Every question, the CEO, Warren would talk. And then he would say, Charlie. And sometimes Charlie would have just a dynamite color. He would drop right in.
Go to the or and I'll answer it for you.
Or half the time he would respond different.
I have nothing to add.
And then he would chew on his peanut brittle. And the way he saw it, there's no point of babbling on. If Warren already covered it, or I don't have a particular point of view on this, why do you want to hear from me? Right? And Jack Welch said this in one of his books, and I always loved it. He said, everyone in a meeting feels like if they were invited to a meeting, they should talk. On every topic, they should have an opinion. And he said, I don't have an opinion on every topic. A lot of the times I just say, I'm not particularly studied in that topic, so I have nothing to add. And there's nothing wrong with that. We used to do a lot more of that, as saying, I guess I don't know too much, but now it feels like because of social media and because we have every answer at the tip of our tongue with an iPhone, that we can Google everything, that we can AI everything, everyone's a friggin' expert on everything. No, you're not. You haven't read much on it. You haven't studied much. You haven't lived it. You're just regurgitating, as you said earlier, you're regurgitating some 30-second clip that you watched on social media. There's nothing wrong in business with saying, I don't know. I don't have enough information to add to that. That's not my area of expertise. Those things, I actually think that's much more intelligent when people say something like that than to try to bullshit their way through it and get into it. I get asked questions on a regular. I'm a consultant. People pay me by the hour to help them. I get asked questions I don't know the answer to pretty frequently, and I'll say it. Like, I don't know. That's a good question. I'm not sure. I've never run into that before. I can go research it a little bit, but I'm just going to do what you did, which is Google it. So I'm probably not the right person to ask. I say that a lot. It's better than me just kind of espousing some bullshit that I don't believe in or I'm not particularly confident in. I'd rather we spend our time on things I am confident in helping you with.
So I started off the beginning of this episode talking about where I'm ill prepared to offer advice or thoughts, and I will end in the same spot. I also talked a little bit about where I am with my kids and how I want to raise them. What I look at with my kids is what's happening right now with current adolescence, because I think adolescence is the point where things can go sideways pretty fast, right? Drugs get involved, you get in with the wrong kids. Like middle school, high school is where things can go sideways. But the only thing I know for sure, what's currently being a problem for middle school and high school kids will be different by the time I get there. So exactly what I'll have to parent is going to be a little bit different, because I think by then fentanyl will be solved, but some new problem will be in place. So what I start to look at is this, right? I am the gatekeeper of my family, and I am the one who has to protect our borders. My wife and I are mostly aligned in these things. My wife's a little bit more tolerant, a little bit more exploratory, but she's smarter. She has the ability to kind of rein things in, and I kind of am an absolutist in certain ways because I don't know if I'll ever come back. So to that end, it's my job to be the gatekeeper. And one of the examples that I read in the past week was about the Zapruder is the guy's name. His name is Abraham Zapruder. And he was filming, there's a 26-second color video of him filming John F. Kennedy driving through Dallas, Texas, right before he was shot in the face. Back then, there was basically a handful of newspapers and a handful of television stations, and these people decided the nation is wounded. We are not going to publish or show the really bad parts. ABC bought it for millions and millions of dollars way before TMZ, and they just suppressed it. It came out like 10 or 12 years later, but they held on to it because we just didn't need to see it. And it was their decision. The internet has taken this away. Everything gets published all the time. Charlie Kirk was shot, and it was on the internet, and Ian's kids saw it before Ian even knew it had happened, which is wrong. But we're not going back. We're not putting the toothpaste back in the tube. So what we have to be mindful of, I think, is we have to be the gatekeepers of what gets into our heads. We have to be mindful of what gets into people who work for us as heads and talk about that and make sure that we kind of put some borders up. And inside of your own household, you have to be the gatekeeper. That's all there is to it. I think Charlie Kirk was trying to do it in his own way, but I don't have that dynamism about myself. What I have is a small group that I have to be very, very, very protective of, and I have to realize there's only so much you can do, but at the same time, it's your job to protect the gate.
And I hope if you've listened to this, I hope you don't agree 100% with me and Frank. I hope there's some things that you disagree with strongly. That's America. That's free speech. That's everything. We've said a little bit of our truth, nor are we dug in. Frank and I are very open-minded to maybe we're wrong on some things. That's fine. If you disagree with us, that's cool too. We still love you for listening to us and we appreciate you. But I think the thing we want to leave it with, love him or hate him, Charlie Kirk was willing to debate. He was willing to sit there, and he was the guy in the arena that would have the conversation, and he was open-minded about speaking his truth and listening to yours. He didn't really insult anyone. I never saw that. He would just speak his truth and listen to yours. And I think if we can learn something from that, I think more people need to do that, both in their personal lives and society, but also within companies. Companies need to be able to get together and have honest debates about the issues you're facing instead of getting dug in on one side or the other. There's never a side. There's just facts, and they're always changing. And as new facts are presented to you, you should be open-minded about how you handle them and what you do about it.
This
You got
is a
anything
business
else,
podcast.
Frankie?
Well, I'm going to wrap with a business point. I think critical thinking and an ability to articulate it are going to become currency going forward. I think this is a flashpoint moment. And I think if you were to lean into what are the skills that'll separate me, keep me kind of nuanced and separated from AI, how do I think? How do I use my resources? And how do I articulate and can build momentum? Those are skills that I think are here to stay.
We would love you to use your critical thinking and mash that like button, turn on subscriptions. Don't forget to put your notifications on with YouTube. And if you haven't forwarded this to some friends that say you got to listen to these two geniuses, you should do that soon. Frankie, great job today. Way to bring it, buddy.
Always a pleasure, Ian.